ground control to Major Tom.
You're watching T.C. McCarthy, the most handsome and entertaining science fiction author on video. Thanks for tuning in again. This is probably episode 10, 12, 15, I don't know. It's one of my episodes in the Tyger Burning series, which reminds me, please pre-order my book. I go ahead and usually put links to it below. Pre-ordering helps me get on the bestsellers list and it helps you get some entertainment. It's going to be available on July 2019, just in time for your summer vacation. What are we covering today? Well, we're going to be taking a look at the Shuttle Columbia disaster. A while ago, I did a video on the Shuttle Challenger disaster. Pew, 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 pew. And we covered how NASA made some fundamental mistakes in terms of its management of the shuttle program. And unfortunately, when it comes to the Shuttle Columbia, it looks like maybe those management mistakes or the management culture didn't get changed enough after the Challenger disaster. Some facts about the Columbia. Columbia was the first shuttle to actually fly in space. And it completed about 21 missions before its final flight. So in January 2003, the Shuttle Columbia lifted off its mission to help construct the International Space Station, and it entered its 28th and final mission. Now the Shuttle Columbia had a crew of 7. Rick Husband, Commander. Michael Anderson, Payload Commander. David Brown, Mission Specialist. And I'm going to butcher this name, my apologies. Kalpana Chawla, Mission Specialist, Laurel Clark, Mission Specialist, William McCool, Pilot, and Ilan Ramon, a Payload Specialist from Israel. So while in orbit, these men and women performed roughly 80 experiments in life sciences, fluid dynamics, a whole range of fields. But unbeknownst to the Columbia astronauts, NASA had detected on takeoff a foam strike. A piece of foam had dislodged from the support for the main fuel tank and struck one of the wings. I believe it was the left wing of the Shuttle Columbia. Now, these kinds of strikes are common, and they happen all the time. And in the past, they had never caused a problem. And as I go through this, I'm going to show a video right about here that displays the actual foam strike as it occurs. These are 2 cameras from 2 different camera angles, where on one camera angle, kind of facing the top of the wing right here, you see, I'm looping it over and over again, you see a piece of foam dislodge from just under the shuttle on top of the main fuel tank, and then it strikes the wing and you see a cloud of foam and other debris kind of break off into a cloud. And then from underneath, you see a shot of the same incident. It's a little bit harder to see in this one. Tiny piece of foam, or actually a fairly sizable piece of foam, breaks off from the main fuel tank and then strikes the wing and again puffs into a cloud of debris. And then in the last clip right here, you've got basically a shot of a test that was done that basically simulated the leading edge of the shuttle wing, and a gun shot a normal-sized piece of foam at about 500 miles an hour. Keep in mind, the shuttle's going very fast. When that foam dislodges and gets caught by the air, it's basically like the shuttle struck an immovable object at about 500 miles an hour. And you can see from this video that does a lot of damage to the leading edge of the wing. This was quite possibly one of the worst situations that the shuttle could have been in. And at the time, several people within NASA had seen the footage and actually pushed management to take pictures. All these agencies that controlled satellites and other assets were begging to take pictures of the wing to see what damage had been occurred. But management at NASA, it was later found out, were putting priorities on getting the International Space Station completed on time, and they didn't want to hear about any problems. So not only did they deny requests to take pictures, they actively went on a mission to suppress any requests to take pictures of the shuttle, and their attitude was, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Plenty of times, again, foam had struck the shuttle plenty of times, they argued, and this time was no different. It was just a foam strike, there was no danger to the crew. Unfortunately, in this case, they were dead wrong. On February 2003, February 1st, the Shuttle Columbia made its approach to land back at Kennedy Space Center. And as the shuttle entered the atmosphere, what happens is basically this thing is coming out at like Mach 25. It's a lot of energy, and it hits that atmosphere, and it's got a lot of resistance and friction, and the entire shuttle is made of these tiles that are ceramic, and they're manufactured, and they're comprised of material to help resist the level of heat that you're going to experience, which I think is well over 1,000 degrees centigrade, maybe several thousand. And so these tiles will start to glow, and plasma will start to form at the nose and begin begin to work its way back as the shuttle heats up, and it kind of comes in at an angle like this so that the underbelly is exposed to the most extreme levels of heat. The problem is, as the shuttle came in, and I'm going to show a video of it here as I talk, as the shuttle came in, that leading edge that had been damaged started to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And as the plasma and heat built up, it began to work its way through the cracks and the hole in the leading edge of the wing, and it began to melt the actual superstructure of the shuttle underneath. And eventually it started to weaken that left wing, and the pilot was trying to control it at that point because the Shuttle Columbia started to yaw to one side and then the other. But eventually the stresses and heat became so much that it began to break apart. And people on the ground witnessed it as this thing came in just like a meteor, and little pieces started to break off until finally the entire shuttle broke into millions, or not millions, but several different chunks, and the crew compartment started spinning out of control. Now, after-action investigations suggest that the crew lost pressurization at that point and went immediately unconscious, but it's not clear if that's what killed them. Later investigations showed that the spinning crew compartment subjected the crew to such force that their straps failed, their suits failed, and that they were probably killed by blunt trauma, basically by flying around the compartment as it spun out of control and slamming into things. They think that's what killed the crew in the end. And at this time, Capcom was unaware of exactly what was going on. The only indications they got were on the left wing. They started losing sensors one after another. And they realized there was a problem. They called up to the shuttle. The commander of the shuttle responded, but he was cut off in mid-sentence. And then if you were live at the time and you were watching the news reports, you could see the Capcom personnel calling out to the shuttle and getting no response. And then finally, someone called in and reported to Capcom that they had seen on the news indications that the shuttle was breaking up over Texas. At that point, the person in charge of Capcom basically says, lock the doors. That's what they do when they know there's a major malfunction and a major problem. All 7 crew members were lost. And in terms of air disasters, it was one of the worst on history in terms of the amount of area or square miles over which wreckage had been basically lost and scattered over the earth. I think it went across 3 states in the Midwest southern parts of the United States. In the following months of the investigation, when the final report was finally released, NASA management was eviscerated, and I believe the head of NASA resigned in disgrace over this incident. It was a cultural problem. Had they taken pictures, it's not clear if anything could have been done. Maybe a rescue mission could have been mounted. In fact, that was one of the questions that the investigating board asked NASA, and in response, they put together what that rescue mission would have looked like, and very few people are aware of this, so I'm going to go through it. It's an amazing set of contingency plans that they would have had to put into place, but as it turns out, another shuttle was almost ready to launch on the heels of Columbia, because again, they were trying to get the International Space Station ready. It would have involved an increase in speed in getting that shuttle ready and lots of risk associated with that, and launching a second crew into space. Now the problem is, how are you going to get 7 astronauts in space plus at least a minimum amount of crew in the shuttle that it would have had to launch to go rescue them? You would have had to bring in, it turns out, about 11 people in a shuttle that was designed to hold only 7. But that was only the first of the problems NASA would have had to tackle. And so the critical question became, how long would this take? If they had embarked on such a rescue mission, how long would the Columbia astronauts in orbit would have had to survive for this second shuttle to get ready, prepped, manned, and launched into orbit to come and rescue them? And what they found was basically the shuttle astronauts, the Columbia astronauts, would have had enough of everything, water, all that kind of stuff. The one thing they would have had too much of, it turns out, is carbon dioxide. And the shuttles were equipped with scrubbers, lithium hydroxide scrubbers that would take carbon dioxide out of the air as the astronauts breathed in and out. Now, the shuttle had 69 of them, but there was no hard data, it turns out, in terms of how long those things last, and if the 69 of them on hand would have been enough to allow the astronauts to survive until rescue. But they guessed if they had put the astronauts on kind of a, sitting still regime, they would have had to relax and rest most of the time so that their breathing rates would be lower and put less stress and strain on the scrubbers. That might have been enough to allow them to survive and keep breathing until the rescue mission arrived. Even then, NASA physicians guessed that they could probably survive heightened CO2 levels to some extent, and that would have allowed them to stretch the scrubber canisters even farther. They would have had to stretch their rations, but NASA figured they could have survived 30 days, which was kind of the target window for the launch of the rescue shuttle. So in order to get the rescue shuttle ready, it would have involved 24/7 operations to meet that hard window of 30 days when they assessed they'd be out of scrubbers and starting to really stretch their food and water supply. 30 days is not a lot of time to get a shuttle ready, so it would have definitely incorporated a lot of dangers, or meant a lot of danger for the shuttle rescue mission. And given the safety culture at that time in NASA, I would have been pretty scared had I been one of those astronauts assigned to the rescue mission, but I would have done it anyway. I know any of those astronauts would have taken that risk to go and rescue their fellow astronauts. And there wouldn't be a lot of time for the astronauts to prepare and train. Usually there's a lot of training that goes on before a shuttle is launched so that the crew knows exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. Here, NASA would have had to select 4 astronauts and given them minimal training and preparation for a mission that they had never attempted to accomplish before. Basically, the idea was the second shuttle would launch and orient itself so that the 2 shuttles were on top of each other, one upside down so that the open cargo bay door would face the open cargo bay door on the other shuttle, and they would get as close as possible. And then 1 by 1 or 2 by 2 astronauts from the stricken shuttle would transfer over to the rescue one until finally they'd all be in their EVA spacesuits, which are big and bulky, until finally the last crew member on Columbia would have had to transfer over. But it's not clear. The maneuvers would have taken 2 astronauts, one of the ones being rescued and one of the rescuers, to get everything in and out of the shuttle. And it's not clear that the remaining one would have been able to do all of those functions in such a bulky spacesuit, but it was the only option they had. Whether to launch the second shuttle would have had to been optimal, and weather doesn't always cooperate, so it's not clear that they would have been able to launch at the 30-day window. And then, of course, you'd have to wonder, would foam strike the wing of the rescue shuttle? That's not clear. That could have happened. Remember, at that point, the foam problem had not been mitigated. But if all had gone according to plan, and the rescue shuttle had returned with the 11 astronauts, we wouldn't be having this discussion, other than how glorious a rescue it had been, and how brave those 4 astronauts were to enter into space given so many potential problems for the rescue mission. But it never happened. NASA never got the chance because NASA management, again, had pushed without properly worrying about the safety of its astronauts. And if the rescue mission had succeeded, the Columbia would have eventually, its orbit would have decayed and degraded until finally it broke up into chunks somewhere over the Pacific. As it stands, we lost 7 brave men and women, so did Israel. And it was one of the biggest tragedies in spaceflight. It wasn't long after that, I think it was 2011, when the shuttle missions entirely were stopped and canceled. And now we're sending astronauts, at least until recently, up on Soyuz spacecraft and on some SpaceX vessels as well. So Merry Christmas to all of you. Again, this was kind of a somber episode, and I apologize for that. But as you enjoy Christmas, please remember the 7 shuttle astronauts who gave their lives in the Columbia February of 2003. End transmission. Hey, TC McCarthy here, the most eclectic and entertaining science fiction author on YouTube, maybe even the internet. Thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. As usual, buy my books. I've got a new one coming out in July, and I'll have a giveaway coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. Appreciate you subscribing to my channel, and please, 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 please don't forget to click that little bell icon so that whenever I upload new content, you get notified. Thanks again. See you soon.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You really